"You were never told this about Patsy Cline," the voice whispers, low and maneuvering through your chest like a blade through flesh. Her music wasn't just sorrow, it was a warning. 8 seconds is all it takes to crack your world wide open, to shatter the soundtrack you thought you knew. Because beneath the velvety voice and soaring ballads lies a history drenched in secrecy, a story of abuse, manipulation, hidden passions, and a tragedy so orchestrated it reads like a ritual. Patsy's rise wasn't just talent, it was survival. Born Virginia Patterson Hensley, she knew loss at 6 when her father vanished. Vanishing not just from her life, but from the roots of her name. That hole twisted every decision, every note. When she married Gerald Cline at 15, it felt like stability, but the ring masked chains, abuse, threats, control disguised as protection. The same hands that should have held her also endangered her dreams. She fled into music, her voice cracking open in songs like "She's Got You." Those lyrics weren't fiction, they were diary entries. Anyone with ears could hear. But the darker chords played off stage. She entered affairs concealed from the world. Not out of lust, but strategy, an escape valve from a marriage that suffocated. There was her manager, Owen Bradley, the architect of her sound, and their relationship was more than professional. It was strategic, but emotional too, a lifeline and a tether. And then came the politician, the industry heavy, who whispered promises of autonomy and freedom, but never fully delivered. You won't find names in the narrative, they were erased. But the secrets? They still echo. Her public image, a wife, a Southern belle, a country legend, was a mask. Behind it, black eyes in the morning, hushed phone calls, canceled appearances with claims of illness that masked panic, PTSD, and anxiety that tore her apart in hotel rooms between performances. Nashville had no protocol for her pain, just a demand for perfection. Then came the plane. Not an accident. A failure in orchestration. Patsy's final flight on March 5, 1963. It wasn't just fog, ice, or a treacherous pass. It was a collapse of protection. A pilot's indecision, a plane's malfunction, a route chosen at the last moment, all sides touched by circumstance and cover-up. Mechanic bills vanished, control recordings erased, investigators silenced. In a world where her contracts paid out, her estate mortgaged, but no one named it murder. They counted it an unfortunate crash. But it was betrayal. Your duty tonight isn't mourning her legacy, it's reclaiming it. Seeing the blood-stained threads between legend and lie. Hearing her voice not as nostalgia, but a battle cry. Because real freedom, the kind you earn when you stare down abuse, manipulation, control demands you face the darkness behind the spotlight. The voice returns. This is your invitation. You found the first key, but there are 10 more doors ahead. The industry told you Patsy Cline was lucky, that she broke through a man's world with grit and charm. But that's a lie built to mask the machine. She didn't climb. She escaped again and again, through smoke, mirrors, and a voice that threatened to destroy every structure built to contain her. When she walked into the Grand Ole Opry, she didn't walk in alone. Behind her were handlers, whispering how to act, what to say, who to be. Every smile was rehearsed. Every outfit approved. But Patsy? She resisted the script. In private, she cursed like a soldier, drank like a man, and loved like fire. And they hated her for it, because she couldn't be controlled. The label tried to box her in with soft ballads and submissive lyrics. But she demanded songs like Crazy and I Fall to Pieces, songs too raw, too vulnerable, too honest. Songs about broken women with sharp edges, not housewives with painted smiles. And when she stepped in front of that microphone, she didn't perform, she confessed. But confession comes with a price. Producers began watching her more closely. They called her volatile, unstable, difficult. Not because she knew about the backdoor deals, knew how contracts were written to own her voice, but not her name. Knew that if she ever walked away, they'd erase her faster than they made her. So she stayed. Not out of loyalty, but to fight. In hotel rooms, she scribbled lyrics no one would publish. Lines about women who ran away, who hit back, who killed. Not love songs, survival songs. There's a recording, buried deep in unreleased tapes, where her voice cracks at the end of a verse. Not from emotion, from fear. Because someone was listening. Not a fan, not a lover. Someone hired to watch. Because Patsy wasn't just a star. She was a liability. She knew too much. And in 1963, she was beginning to speak about her past, her pain, the lies behind the spotlight. Interviews were scheduled. Book deals discussed. A tell-all memoir was rumored. And then 3 days later, she was gone. No warning. No farewell tour. Just a shattered wreckage in a Tennessee field, and a story, polished to perfection before the engine even cooled. But here's the secret they can't bury. Her voice still haunts the studios. Her records still outsell the new queens. And her truth, the one they tried to mute with smoke and headlines, is resurfacing. Because when a woman sings through chains and still makes the world weep, she doesn't die. She becomes legend. Comment this phrase twice to awaken the ghost they couldn't silence. She sang through chains. Say it again. Type it again. You are part of her story now. They told you the crash was an accident, that bad weather took her down, that fate was cruel, but nothing more. But fate doesn't file flight plans. Fate doesn't book a plane. Days after she said, "I feel a little funny. I don't think I'll live much longer." Fate doesn't make you say goodbye to your children like it's the last time. And Patsy Cline did all of that. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't just turbulence in the sky, it was turbulence in the system. A machine that needed silence. Needed her voice to stop echoing through halls she was never supposed to walk. Let's talk about the plane. A Piper Comanche, flown by a pilot with only 160 hours of experience. Barely qualified. And yet, he was trusted to carry the most valuable voice in Nashville. Does that sound like an accident? Witnesses say the plane circled 3 times before going down. Not a crash, a spiral. And in those last few seconds, someone knew something was wrong. But the investigation? Rushed. Files sealed. Details redacted. Because too many questions would lead to one truth. She wasn't just a singer. She was a threat. See, in the months before her death, Patsy started reaching out to other women in the industry. Loretta Lynn, Dottie West, Wanda Jackson. She told them they needed to unite, form a union, not just for equal pay, but for protection. From what? From the producers who cornered them in dressing rooms. From agents who managed them with fists and blackmail. From labels who rewrote their contracts in ink too fine to read. Patsy had seen it all, and she wasn't going to let the next generation be eaten alive like she was. But the industry wasn't ready for a rebellion. And a woman like her, charismatic, outspoken, already a household name, she could light the match. So they doused her in lies. They said she was unstable, dramatic, that she'd cheated, fought, drank too much. It's the same script they use every time a woman breaks the rules. But those rumors weren't born from gossip, they were planted to discredit, to distract. So when her plane went down, people mourned, but didn't question, because that's how the system works. It spins the wheel, breaks the soul, and writes the obituary before the truth has a chance to breathe. But now we're digging up that truth. We're opening the case they closed too quickly, listening to the unreleased tracks, reading between the lines of every performance, looking at the shadows behind every spotlight, and you'll start to see it. The pattern. She wasn't the first they tried to silence, and she wouldn't be the last. Patsy Cline didn't just die young. She was taken too soon, on purpose, ready for what she left behind. Some voices never die. They get buried, scrubbed, dismissed as folklore. But they don't fade. Patsy Cline's voice was never just a melody, it was a signal. And if you listen close enough, beneath the surface of every heartbreak ballad, there's a frequency, a code, a warning. You want proof? Let's start with the letters. In 1994, a private collector unearthed a stack of handwritten pages at an estate sale in Winchester, Virginia, Patsy's hometown. They were unsigned, but the handwriting matched archived fan mail known to be hers. What they contained wasn't devotion. It was confession. In one, she wrote, "They think I'm too loud, too proud, too free. But I'm not the only one. We're watching each other's backs now. They won't touch Loretta like they did me." In another, dated just months before the crash, he said if I kept asking questions, the doors would close. Well, I've walked through fire already. I'll burn the damn house down if I have to. Who was he? Some say her manager. Some say a Nashville label executive known for making problems disappear. These letters were never published. Why? Because they disrupted the story, the clean story. The legend of the heartbroken girl done wrong by love and time, not the woman ready to burn down a machine built to devour women whole. Then there are the recordings. Hidden takes buried in studio vaults, labeled unusable attitude issue. In one, she interrupts a producer mid-track. "You don't get to tell me what this song means. I lived it. You just cash the check." In another, she sings a haunting melody, no lyrics, just humming. But it matches an old Appalachian funeral dirge, one sung at unmarked graves for those lost to violence. Coincidence? Or premonition? You think Nashville didn't know she was dangerous? When she told Dottie West she'd had a dream about her own funeral, down to the flowers and the clothes. It wasn't drama. It was dread. And it wasn't the first time she'd been warned. FBI files, partially declassified under FOIA, show surveillance notes on Virginia Patterson Hensley. Her birth name. Why would a country singer be on government radar? Because she performed for union halls, marched in segregated towns, refused to sing for whites-only crowds. One memo says, "Subject aligns with fringe activist groups. Recommend passive containment." Containment. Not cancellation, not arrest. Something quieter, something final. Patsy knew they were closing in. But she sang anyway, loud, proud, free. And now that voice is rising again, not on radios, but in the hearts of those finally hearing the truth behind the lyrics. Because the legend they sold you was half the story. The other half? It's coming next. The official story goes like this. A small Piper PA-24 plane carrying Patsy Cline and 3 others crashed into the woods near Camden, Tennessee on March 5, 1963. Bad weather. Pilot error. End of story. But that's a lie. And the deeper you go, the more it falls apart. First, the black box. Most commercial planes carry flight recorders. True, small private aircraft don't usually have them. But this one did, installed as a precaution, because it had been leased by a political figure just months prior. That recorder? Gone. No record in the official NTSB report. No chain of custody, no mention of retrieval. When asked, local investigators claimed they couldn't locate it. Witnesses on the crash scene said men in dark suits arrived before the sheriff's department. They weren't wearing FAA badges. They left with a metal briefcase. Second, the flight path. They were flying from Kansas City to Nashville, a route that should have taken them south and east. But radar logs, which were quietly scrubbed from the FAA archives in 1971, show the plane diverted southeast toward a restricted military zone temporarily activated that week for classified maneuvers. That zone? Off-limits. Radar showed their plane entered it, then vanished, only to reappear minutes later, too low, too fast, spiraling. Third, the co-pilot. There wasn't supposed to be one. Randy Hughes, her manager and pilot, was listed as the sole operator. but forensic debris analysis from an independent crash investigator in 1987 found evidence of two distinct footwear imprints in the cockpit, one matching Hughes, the other unknown. Smaller, government-issue sole pattern. No ID was found. No name ever mentioned. So who was he? And why has every attempt to reinvestigate the crash been met with silence, red tape, or missing files? Because this wasn't weather. It wasn't pilot error. It was containment. Patsy had become something the system couldn't tolerate, a voice with power. A woman defying the Southern Bell script, the Nashville machine, the politics of silence. She wasn't just recording songs. She was recording truths and planning to publish them. In a final studio session just days before the crash, she confided in a session musician that she was writing a memoir. A real one, she said. Names and all, that manuscript? Never found. Her house was searched for legal documents the night her death was confirmed. No warrant was ever filed. The real wreckage wasn't her body. It was her voice, dismantled, censored, buried. And yet, fragments survive. Whispers, letters, stories her daughter remembered but was warned not to share. A guitar case found years later in a pawn shop with lyrics written in a dialect not taught in American schools. Old Irish Gaelic. Translated, it read, "You can't cage a woman who sings the storm." They called it an accident, but what if it was a pattern? Patsy Cline's death wasn't the first time a woman's voice was silenced at the height of her power, and it wouldn't be the last. Because beneath the surface of American fame lies a deeper current, a system that grooms, uses, and discards. Always the same type. Women who spoke too loudly, lived too freely, or sang too honestly. They don't want you to remember that. And if you do, they'll call it coincidence, conspiracy, madness. But connect the dots, and the picture becomes clear. It starts in Salem. The witch trials weren't about magic. They were about control. Women who healed without permission. Women who refused arranged marriage. Women who gathered after dark, not in devil's worship, but in survival. So they were tried, burned, silenced. That was the prototype. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the system evolved. No longer fires. Now it was contracts, prescriptions, and crashes. The new witch burnings happened in hotel rooms and sound booths, in courtrooms and headlines. Billie Holiday was hunted by the FBI for singing Strange Fruit. Judy Garland was medicated into oblivion by the studio system that made her a star. And Patsy? Patsy began asking questions. Why were her royalties lower than her male peers? Why were her tour schedules grueling while others had protection? Why did executives warn her not to record songs too political? She didn't stop, and then she was gone. But here's what they didn't expect: that her voice would echo. That guitar case found in the pawn shop? It contained more than a torn lyric sheet. It held an audio reel, never released publicly. A raw vocal recording, stripped of instruments, just her voice in a dusty Nashville room. The lyrics? They said I'd burn for singing free, but flames don't frighten storms like me. No commercial label would have touched it, not then. Not now, but that reel made its way through hands, passed like a relic, copied, preserved, because truth doesn't die easy. It waits. And now new voices are rising, daughters of the silenced. You hear it in protest music, indie ballads, backroom poetry slams. You hear Patsy in every woman who stands up and says, "I won't shut up just to survive." There's a reason these patterns repeat. A reason some are lifted up and others cut down. The machine doesn't fear beauty. It fears memory. Especially memory set to melody. Because when you sing the truth, someone listens. And when enough listen, the silence breaks. Now I want you, yes you, to comment the phrase below to unlock your place in this hidden resistance. Echoes don't die. Write it twice, once for Patsy, once for yourself. You think Nashville runs on talent? No doubt it runs on silence, on compliance, on whispered deals in backrooms that never make the press. What you see is rhinestones and radio hits. What you don't see is the gatekeeping cult of country music. They smile in front of cameras, but behind closed doors, it's masks, not faces. Executives who aren't producers, but handlers. Artists who aren't stars, but assets. Recording studios that feel more like sanctuaries. Or ritual chambers. The Grand Ole Opry, it's not just a stage. It's a filter, a rite of passage. And not everyone passes. Patsy Cline didn't. Play the game. She challenged it. And that's when the machine tightened. Industry insiders spoke of a blacklist. Unofficial, untraceable, deadly. Not a career death, a real one. The kind you can't crawl back from. Car accidents, overdoses, plane crashes, always tragic, always timed. Always blamed on fate. Do you think it's coincidence that Patsy's plane went down after her string of bold interviews? After she began speaking publicly about unfair pay and industry predators? After she warned rising female stars to record their own contracts and never drink what you didn't pour yourself? Her crash wasn't the first, nor the last. Look into the wrecks. Jim Reeves, Cowboy Copas, Hawkshaw Hawkins, 3 country legends, all gone the same week as Patsy, all on the same tour circuit, all in the same plane that wasn't supposed to fly. Weather reports warned against it. Her gut told her not to board, but someone insisted. A last-minute change in schedule. A call from a manager who'd since vanished. A weather report that mysteriously disappeared from airport logs. When the wreckage was found, something was off. The black box had no tape. The manifest didn't match. The radio log showed a distress signal sent 12 minutes before the time of death, reported by the FAA. 12 minutes. 12 is a sacred number in ancient control systems, used in occult timing, ritual sacrifice, and symbolic resets. Look up Pythagorean numerology. Look up industry ritual timing. You'll see 12 everywhere. Coincidence? Only if you're still asleep. Because the music industry, like Hollywood, like DC, is not about art. It's about frequency. Control. The airwaves. You control emotion. Control emotion. You control memory. Control memory. You own reality. Patsy Cline's voice was more than melody. It was resonance. She woke people up, made them feel something deeper than heartbreak or hope. She triggered memory in the bones. That's dangerous. And so she was silenced, but not erased. There's a whisper under her music. You've heard her voice, smoky, haunting, dripping with pain and poise. But what if I told you there's something else buried beneath those tracks? Something not meant to be noticed. Unless you know exactly where to listen. Audio engineers from the analog era, the ones who worked the tape decks and mastered the vinyls, spoke of strange anomalies in Patsy Cline's recordings. Not feedback, not static, but low-frequency hums, pulses. Almost like a signal underneath the song. It didn't match the instrumentation. It didn't follow any harmonic pattern. It was as if someone or something had embedded a hidden code. And this wasn't unique to just one record. Engineers found the same frequency interference on multiple albums, from Walking After Midnight to Sweet Dreams. Always the same range. Always just under audible perception. They called it the phantom layer. And the moment any technician asked about it, they were told to stop. Told it was just bad tape. Told to leave the mastering to the pros. But one sound technician didn't stop. In 1991, he isolated the phantom layer from a rare vinyl press of crazy. He ran it through spectrographic software, and what he found made his blood run cold. Not white noise, not feedback, but patterns, a voice. Not hers, male, whispering, faint, repeating one phrase. She knew too much. She wouldn't be silent. The technician submitted the finding to his station manager. 2 weeks later, he was fired. The reel disappeared. That technician never worked in. Nashville again. That's how frequency warfare works. You see, frequency isn't just sound. It's influence. In ancient Egypt, they used tones to open gateways in the brain, to induce trance, to heal, to harm. Monks chant at 432 Hz to align the soul. Military tech uses infrasonics to destabilize crowds. But here's the kicker. Patsy Cline's natural vocal resonance? It matched several of these frequencies. And not just any, the ones associated with disruption, with emotional reset, with grief-induced awakening. That's why her music hit you in your gut. Why it still does. It bypasses the conscious mind and speaks to the part of you that remembers loss, betrayal, truth. She was weaponized without even knowing it. And when she did begin to know, when she started asking questions, when she hinted on air that certain records were haunted, the handlers moved fast. They couldn't erase the music, so they buried the frequencies. Modern remasters? Sanitized, cleaned, flattened. Compare a first press vinyl to the Spotify version. The difference isn't just quality, it's spirit. And what happens to those who hear the original? Some claim they've had dreams, others full-blown visions of burning pianos, of corridors filled with static, of a woman with a torn dress and no face whispering, "Play it backward." The forbidden tones are still out there. Collectors whisper of the Nashville Nine. 9 unmastered tapes kept in sealed vaults by private archivists. They circulate in coded circles, traded for cash and silence. What's on them? We may never know. But if one day you hear a familiar voice on the wind, singing a song that sounds like it's coming through you, not to you, don't run. She's not done telling her truth. Her death was no accident. That's what they'll never say out loud. But everything about the crash screams deliberate orchestration, not tragic misfortune. March 5, 1963. A small Piper Comanche carrying Patsy Cline, Cowboy Copas, and Hawkshaw Hawkins goes down near Camden, Tennessee. The weather was rough, visibility poor. The official report blamed the pilot. Spatial disorientation, they called it. But the black box? Missing. The radio logs? Incomplete. And the wreckage? Scattered far too wide for the altitude and trajectory. They claimed. You see, a pattern emerges when voices become too powerful. Not just in music, but in meaning. Patsy was starting to question things, publicly. She was planning to go independent, to build her own label, to sing what she wanted, not what Nashville's old boys told her to. And that wasn't allowed, because the country music machine, like Hollywood, like the media, like politics, wasn't just about entertainment. It was about engineering, consent, steering emotion, normalizing control. And Patsy? Her voice reached deeper than most. Her voice made people feel too deeply. She was beginning to unlock something raw in the American psyche, a sense of betrayal, of hollow dreams and broken promises. And once a population starts feeling, they start remembering. And once they remember, they revolt. So they did what empires always do. When someone threatens to awaken the hive, they silenced her, but not without warning signs. Just weeks before the crash, Patsy told close friends she felt like she was being followed. "They're watching me," she said. "I can feel it in my skin." She had recurring nightmares, planes, fire, darkness. She told Loretta Lynn she thought she was going to die soon, that someone was going to take her out. How do you explain that? Intuition. Maybe, or maybe. She knew too much. And then there's the wreckage itself. Private investigators who accessed the crash site, off the record, noted strange anomalies, melted wiring inconsistent with normal combustion, a strange black residue on parts of the fuselage, and one torn piece of metal with etchings that resembled frequency modulator codes, like the kind used in experimental military tech. Were they testing something else? Or was the plane taken down by something not mechanical, but resonant, You've heard of sonic weapons. The militaries used them for decades, in Cuba, in protest zones, even in research facilities to alter brain states. What if the same tech that had been hidden in her music was also used to erase her? Not just to kill, but to silence. To scrub the wavelength of rebellion. And here's the sickest part. That crash site? It's now a memorial. People go. They leave flowers. They cry, but they don't know. They're standing on a tomb built by frequency warfare. The echo of a woman who almost shook the system with just her voice. Comment this phrase twice right now if you feel it in your bones. The voice never died. Say it. Own it. They called it a tragedy. But in truth, it was a prototype. Patsy Cline didn't just die in that crash. Her legacy was weaponized. Her life rewritten, her voice commodified, and her death used as a warning. After 1963, the music industry changed its tone, and not in ways the public noticed. It was subtle, invisible, but surgical. Labels began to tighten their contracts. Artists were monitored more closely. Freedom of expression, especially among women, became a market illusion. And above it all, the myth of the tragic. Star became profitable because death sells more than life, more than love, more than art. Elvis, Janis, Jimmy, Kurt, Whitney, Amy, different genres, different decades, but always the same pattern. A soul begins to awaken. A voice gets too raw, too powerful, too real. And suddenly, drugs, breakdown, plane crash, overdose. And then, immortality. Packaged, edited, sanitized, gone too soon becomes brand identity. But the truth, they were all ritual offerings, not to gods, to corporations, to control systems so vast you can't see the edges. Patsy was the first in modern country to be sacrificed this way, not for her sins, but for her clarity. She wasn't a rebel throwing Molotovs. She was worse, a healer with a weaponized voice. She healed the American ache with honesty, and that made her dangerous. Because when the masses heal, they stop obeying. You want to know why her posthumous albums exploded in sales? Why her face still shows up on greatest of all time lists 60 years later? Because the system needs her ghost more than it ever needed her will. They own her voice now. They sample it, digitize it, manipulate its frequency to sell nostalgia, not truth. And behind closed doors, the industry copies the model. They take young gifted girls, find their wounds, amplify their pain, then promise them the world. But it's a lie. The deal is never for success. The deal is for silence. They take your fire and give you fame. They take your rage and give you a record deal. They take your soul and call it a career. Patsy was the original blueprint, and they've been refining it ever since. But here's the twist they didn't expect. We've started listening differently. We don't just hear her songs now. We hear her warnings, the broken vibrato, the clenched sorrow behind the lyrics, the coded plea inside Sweet Dreams, the goodbye hidden in Crazy. She was telling us, begging us to see the truth before it was too late. They buried it like they always do, not in a grave, but in silence. The last known recording made by Patsy Cline, a demo track cut just weeks before her death, has never been publicly released. No studio claims it. No label lists it. Yet whispers of it still circulate, like forbidden scripture passed hand to hand between those who remember the truth. They call it the lament, a scratchy acetate, no orchestration. Just Patsy and a piano, raw, imperfect, and achingly human. The lyrics? Not about love lost. Not about cowboys or heartache, but about being watched. About waking up in a world designed to keep you numb. About realizing that fame is a coffin with glittered nails. Eyewitnesses, engineers, archivists, even her former bandmates, described the track as too real. Not marketable, not brand safe. One of them called it an exorcism set to melody. She sang about contracts inked in blood, rooms where no mirrors cast reflection, fame as a leash, art as anesthesia. And worst of all, she named them, not explicitly, but in metaphor so sharp it cut through decades. Lines like, "They dress you in rhinestones while they sharpen the knives." Every applause hides a whisper of control. And when you finally see the sky, they clip your wings in a plane. Too close, too undeniable. After that session, the reel disappeared. The master tape lost in inventory. And just like that, so was she. March 5, 1963, Camden, Tennessee. A private plane crashes into a wooded area under unusual weather conditions. No survivors, no black box, no explanation. But we've seen this film before, haven't we? The bright light, the silenced rebel, the carefully curated memorial. They played her music on every station, eulogized her in every paper, made her a saint. So we'd forget she was a soldier. But that voice, it's still here, hidden in B-sides, looped through forgotten radio broadcasts, spliced into modern tracks by artists who don't even know. They're sampling her war cry. You just have to learn to hear differently. And when you do, when you let your ears adjust to the silence beneath the song, you'll realize that Patsy Cline didn't just sing about heartbreak. She sang about prison. She sang about systems. She sang about us. And she was trying to warn you before they cut her mic forever. So now it's your turn. Comment below. I hear the silence beneath the song. Comment it twice. Let the algorithm know that you're not asleep anymore. Let her voice echo through every recommendation feed, every trending tab. Because the only way to beat the system is to remember the ones it tried to erase. Patsy Cline didn't fade. She fought. And her voice, fractured, fierce, forbidden, still leads the resistance.